So what if the sun didn't actually create the light, but just stole the credit for it?
Oh man, that is such a heavy question.
Right. I mean, today we are looking at a text that basically turns the entire sky into a crime scene of stolen attention. So welcome to today's deep dive. We're so glad you are here with us.
Yeah, we have a really fantastic one for you today.
We really do. We're going to be pulling apart this truly incredible, highly evocative mythological text called Signature of the Silver Tide. And our mission for you today isn't just to, tell you a neat story about the cosmos.
No, not at all.
It's actually to examine this massive recurring human question. Like, why do we instinctively worship loud, visible things while just completely erasing the quiet foundational forces that make those loud things possible in the first place?
And you know what's fascinating here is that exact tension is the beating heart of this text.
Yeah,
It takes these massive celestial bodies, right? The sun, the moon, the stars, and it completely reframes their existence. It takes standard orbital mechanics and turns them into this deeply personal family drama about origin and historical revisionism.
Right.
And ultimately, it's about the mechanics of how you go about reclaiming a stolen narrative when, well, when the whole world has just agreed to a lie.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to even get into the psychology of this myth, we really have to start with a concept that fundamentally breaks how we usually think about creation.
Right.
I mean, we are so conditioned to think that beginnings require a big bang.
Oh, absolutely.
We expect noise, chaos, these violent explosions of heat just tearing through a void. But this text, it starts with a figure named Marin, and Marin is the original dark.
Yes.
But, and this is crucial, she's not an empty, dead void. She is highly conscious and deeply, deeply patient.
Exactly. The text actually describes her as being curved around her own stillness. The quote is, the way deep water curves around a stone dropped through it long ago.
Oh, I love that imagery so much.
It's beautiful, isn't it? And she doesn't have eyes because, I mean, there's nothing to see yet. But she has this profound internal rhythm. The author writes that the tides of every ocean that would ever exist already moved faintly inside her, just waiting for a shore. So she isn't lonely, and she isn't lacking anything at all.
Wait, okay, I need to stop you there and just wrap my head around this.
Sure, go ahead.
If Marin is literally just an empty, conscious darkness, how does she actually, kindle a spark to create light? I mean, is this just a poetic metaphor for thought becoming reality? Or is there a physical mechanism the text is trying to hint at?
That's actually a really brilliant metaphor for potential energy.
Oh, okay.
Think of a held breath that just aches for release, or a long silence carried in the body that eventually just wants to make a sound so it can hear itself land.
Wow, yeah.
There was a fullness in her that simply wanted somewhere to go. So she reaches into the absolute deepest chamber of herself, into that banked potential energy, and she kindles a spark.
But it's not instantaneous, right? Like, she sits with this spark cupped inside her for an age.
Right, a very long time.
Yeah, she feeds it on her own patience, her own certainty of having survived being alone. And when it finally catches, it just roars out of her hands. It launches outward, blazing, completely hungry for a horizon it hasn't even earned yet. And that spark, that's her daughter, Celine, the sun.
And right away, the text establishes this huge psychological contrast. Marin is patient. She folds her light back toward herself in these long silver tides. But Celine is entirely urgent.
She's so loud.
So loud, she throws herself outward, demanding to be witnessed. And Marin watches this creation with a kind of vertigo. It's described as the dizziness of watching something made from your own depths grow so incredibly bright that it can no longer even see the dark that made it.
That is so powerful. It actually makes me think about how we build things in our own world.
Oh, how so?
Well, think about a massive skyscraper in a major city. The foundation of that building, it has to be dug deep into the dark earth. It has to be heavy, quiet, and completely invisible for the skyscraper to actually stand.
Right, nobody sees the concrete.
Exactly. Then the skyscraper goes up, covered in all this glass, catching the sun, and everyone walking by just stares up in awe at this shining monolith. No one looks at the pavement and praises the foundation. Or it's like a quiet, introverted creator who launches a massive viral project.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
The creator is patient and inward, but the creation is loud, urgent, and just takes on a life of its own.
That's a perfect structural parallel. And they aren't in competition, they need each other. What's fascinating here is that the myth explicitly states that this relationship at the beginning was exactly that, A sequence, not a hierarchy.
A sequence, right.
Yeah, Marin kept her hours in the dark and Celine kept hers in the light. They coexisted beautifully, like a held breath in its release. They were just two parts of a whole cosmic ecosystem.
But then the world begins to fill up with life. And this is where the sociological aspect of the text just hits so hard.
It really does.
Because life gravitates toward warmth. Seeds crack open, reaching for Celine's light. When mortals finally arrive, they literally build their entire measurement of time around Celine because her arrivals are loud and her departures into dusk are spectacular. I mean, she makes herself impossible to look away from.
Which is entirely natural, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But slowly, the narrative of the world begins to shift. Mortals start speaking of Celine first, and then almost exclusively of Celine.
Right.
And then comes the real injury. The part the text says entered Marin like a splinter she could never quite find to pull back out. Humanity began speaking of Marin's own light as if it had never belonged to her in the first place.
Ugh, that part is so heartbreaking. But wait, let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Sure.
Isn't that just a natural byproduct of how human memory works? Like, we remember the big flashy event, not the prep work. Is it really erasure if it's just human nature taking the path of least cognitive resistance?
Well, that is a very fair point, and cognitive ease certainly plays a role. I mean, it is always easier to worship the loud thing than to stop and ask where the loud thing came from.
Right.
But the text pushes back on that idea by showing how this erasure became systematized. It wasn't just passive forgetting. It was active historical revisionism.
Yeah, they really rewrote the whole story.
They did. They started calling Marin just a mirror. They called her Celine's leftover. And there's this deeply unsettling detail in the text about a priestess who builds a temple with a single door facing east.
Oh, yes, I remember that.
It was deliberately designed so that no one entering it would ever have to look at the night and be reminded it even existed.
That is so intentional. Oh, and the mother who tells her child that the moon is only a lantern the sun forgot to blow out.
Yes.
The tragedy of the skyscraper analogy isn't just that the foundation is ignored, it's that people are actively building a religion around the idea that the skyscraper is just magically floating in midair.
Exactly. It is the active erasure of the origin. And sure, there were a few mortals who remembered the true story, like an old woman on a rooftop or a fisherman reading the tides.
Right, the quiet observers.
Yeah. But their memories were kept like coals banked under ash. They just had no cultural power.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because I am looking at Celine's role in this, and I just have to ask you, is she the villain here?
That's the big question.
Yeah, is she maliciously stealing the spotlight and actively trying to erase her mother? Or is this just, the unavoidable trap of being the center of attention?
Well, the author is incredibly careful with this distinction. If we connect this to the bigger picture, Celine was not initially cruel. What she suffered from was just the plain carelessness of the newly powerful.
The carelessness of power. Wow.
Right. When you are suddenly the center of everyone's universe, you develop massive blind spots. She became dazzled by the devotion, drunk on being needed by everything that lived. She didn't invent the false stories herself, but she began to believe them because, well, the stories benefited her.
Yeah, it's easy to believe a lie that makes you a god.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The privilege of the highly visible is that they never have to question the narrative that keeps them on top.
And that carelessness translates into actual territorial expansion in the sky. I mean, Celine starts rising early. She starts crowding into the last stretch of dusk that had always belonged to Marin.
Right. Encroaching on her time.
And when Marin gently asks her why she's bleeding into her hours, Celine just laughs with the complete thoughtlessness of someone who has never had to ask permission. She just says, "They were waiting for me."
Ugh, that line.
It hurts. And Marin just goes quiet. She feels herself go a little thinner that night.
Because she internalizes the rejection. She rationalizes it by telling herself that light can't actually be taken, only shared unevenly. And she tells herself this for so long that she literally thins, night by night, into a sliver.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she becomes this fingernail of silver at the edge of the dark, almost forgetting the shape she used to be before she started making herself small just to accommodate her daughter's ego.
Just think about a time you laid the grueling groundwork for a massive project at work, or maybe you organized a huge event behind the scenes, only to stand in the back of the room and watch the person who delivered the final presentation get all the glory and the promotions.
Oh, everyone knows that feeling.
Right. That specific hollow ache where you start to wonder if your contribution even mattered at all. That is the exact splinter Marin is dealing with. Which leads us to the new moon. Eventually, Marin just stops fighting for her sliver of sky. She vanishes entirely.
But the text completely redefines the mechanics of this astronomical phenomenon. Down on Earth, mortals assume she simply ran out of light. They think she's empty, a deficit.
They think she's gone.
Yeah. But the text reveals the new moon isn't a state of emptiness. It is an active, deliberate retreat. She pulled her last thin edge inward and went down into the original dark beneath her own dark, the place she came from before she even had a name.
I just love how the text describes this descent. It's not a physical journey. It's an archaeological dig through her own trauma. On her way down, she has to pass through every version of the false stories that have been told about her. She passes through the priestess's east-facing door. She passes through the child's forgotten lantern. She sheds them layer by layer.
It's remarkably similar to how human psychology processes deep emotional injury. I mean, a body has to pass back through every year of an old grief, every lie it was told about itself, before it can finally reach the original wound underneath.
Right.
She had to realize that none of those stories were ever actually about her. They were only about what was most convenient for the world to believe.
And in that deep foundational dark, beneath all the societal noise, she finds the stars. But not the constellations that mortals named after their own loud heroes. She finds the first stars.
The ancient ones.
Yeah, the ancient humming ones who watched her kindle Celine in the very beginning. They held the true memory, the objective truth.
And crucially, those stars do not comfort her. They do not coddle her. They merely witness her, which the text notes is much more precise and necessary than pity. And one of these ancient stars, emitting a low seismic hum, asks her the single most foundational question of the entire myth. It asks, do you remember what you were before anyone needed you to be a mirror?
That line is just staggering, stripping away all external validation, all utility to other people. Do you remember what you were before anyone needed you to be a mirror?
It gives you chills.
It really does. And sitting in that absolute quiet, she does. She remembers the spark before it was even a daughter. She remembers that Celine's fire was lit from her coal, never the other way around.
And this realization, it doesn't arrive as just some intellectual epiphany. It arrives as an actual physical mechanism in the body. A heat spreading up from where a sternum would be, feeling exactly like the original spark she fed ages ago. Because losing yourself to a society's false narrative isn't a permanent condition. Your original fire is still banked underneath. Marin hadn't lost her fire. She had merely lent her attention to a story that insisted she never had one. And once she withdraws that attention, the fire returns.
And with that fire remembered, Marin surfaces. She doesn't come back as a polite, hesitant sliver trying to ask for her space back.
No, she does not.
She comes back entirely whole, full, silver white, undeniable. She takes up the entire black sky because she finally remembers she has every right to. Mortals look up and call it a supermoon, or a blood moon, when her old fire shows faintly in her color.
But this raises an important question, though. How do you actually correct a systemic lie once it is so deeply entrenched in a culture? Because Marin realizes she can't just come back and exist quietly.
Right, because the system is still broken.
Exactly. Yeah. Celine feels the pressure of her mother's return. And out of careless habit, Celine comes to the horizon early to take over the sky again. But she finds Marin already there, standing directly in her path.
The dialogue in this confrontation is electric. Celine tries to fall back on her old excuses, right? She says, "They're waiting for me." And Marin replies, "They were waiting for both of us once. Before you let them decide, my half of the waiting didn't count."
Oh, that is such a brilliant line.
Celine is genuinely shaken by this. The words about light being owed to the loudest source suddenly won't form in her mouth. So she retreats to defensiveness. She says, "I didn't take anything from you. I only shone. Is that a crime? To shine."
And Marin's response cuts through the entire illusion of passive privilege. She says, no, but you let them build a whole world's worth of stories where I never lit anything at all, and you never once corrected a single one of them because the story made you the only sun in the sky that used to hold two.
Man.
The crime wasn't shining. The crime was complicity in a lie that benefited her.
So what does this all mean for how the sky actually functions? Because, you can't just speak truth to a false narrative that entrenched. You have to physically interrupt the system. As the text says, Marin has to make her case in the register of the body itself.
Yes.
She does the one thing that cannot be argued with. She moves directly into her daughter's path. She hangs in the exact center of what should have been noon, physically blocking the sun, ringed in the thin fire of her daughter's borrowed back blaze. A solar eclipse.
It's incredible.
It isn't just a coincidence of orbital mechanics. In this myth, an eclipse is a masterclass in systemic disruption.
It is the ultimate act of forcing a pause.
Hmm.
And you have to realize, Marin didn't do this to destroy Selene. She didn't do it to plunge the Earth into a permanent ice age. I mean, the eclipse only lasts for minutes.
Right. She still loves her.
She still loves her daughter, even while furious with her. She only did it to be seen standing exactly where she has always had the right to stand. When a false narrative is that loud, sometimes the only way to rewrite it is to block the light and force everyone in the system to look at the dark they've been ignoring.
And it works. When she finally moves on and the light floods back, Celine's blaze is noticeably softer at the edges. She finally admits, her voice cracking, "I forgot you were the one who lit me."
Yeah,
And Marin acknowledges that everyone forgets the mother of the loud thing eventually. That part isn't necessarily a fault of malice, just a flaw of memory. But letting it continue long after you know better, well, that was the choice that had to be broken.
what really elevates this text is that it refuses to give us a neat, tidy fairy tale ending. The sky physically cannot handle two such immense lights being that close without causing catastrophe.
No, it would burn us all up.
Right. So there is no warm embrace. Instead, they achieve a complicated, highly deliberate peace. They are two beings who wounded each other through a mix of accident and structural neglect. And they are now making a conscious choice not to keep doing it out of habit anymore.
It fundamentally changes the way you look up at the sky. Because down below on Earth, during this new piece, the mythology actually shifts. The text ends with a different mother telling her child a new story.
I love this part.
It's so good. Not about a forgotten lantern, but about a fire that has always had two hands cupped around it. One hand that strikes the spark in the dark and one hand that carries it into the day. And the child believes her. It's a small, beautiful rewriting of the systemic lie.
And it leaves us with a highly practical reality for how we navigate our own lives, too. The text explains that Marin still disappears sometimes into the new moon. But she isn't running out of light, and she isn't hiding in defeat. She is retreating into her own quiet space to remember her core self, entirely on her own schedule. She answers to no one's need for her to be constantly visible or useful. Retreating into the dark to reconnect with your uncorrupted truth is a demonstration of immense power, not weakness.
And when she does step in front of the sun during an eclipse, it's not a random interruption of the day, it is a signature. She is actively signing her name across a sky that tried to forget her.
Perfectly said.
So, to leave you with one final thought to mull over long after this deep dive ends today, if those distant first stars deep in the original dark were the only entities who remembered the uncorrupted truth of Marin's spark, what other ancient forgotten truths might those quiet celestial bodies be holding?
That is a great question.
And when you look around at the loud, blindingly bright stories that completely dominate our own world today, who else out there might just need to retreat into that quiet, conscious darkness long enough to finally hear them?